Canada is the second largest country in the world in the area after Russia. She occupies roughly the northern 2/5 of the continent of North America. Despite Canada's great size, it is one of the world's most sparsely populated countries. This fact, coupled with the grandeur of the landscape, has been central to the sense of Canadian national identity. Canadians are comparatively few in number. They have crafted what many observers consider to be a model multicultural society, welcoming immigrant populations from every other continent. In addition, Canada holds and exports a wealth of natural resources and intellectual capital which is equaled by few other countries. Canada is officially bilingual, in English and French. This reflects the country's history as ground once contested by two of Europe's great powers. Canada shares a 5,525-mile-long border with the United States including Alaska. It is the longest border in the world, and is not patrolled by military forces. The overwhelming majority of its population lives within 185 miles of the international boundary. Although Canada shares many similarities with its southern neighbor, the United States, the differences between the two countries, both temperamental and material, are profound. Canadians live in a society that in most legal and official matters resembles Britain. Quebec, in particular, exhibits French adaptations. More than 3/4 of its population speaks French as their primary language. Quebec, in particular, exhibits French adaptations. More than 3/4 of its population speaks French as their primary language. Canada has been an influential member of the Commonwealth, and has played a leading role in the organization of French-speaking countries known as La Francophonie. Canada's capital is also the second largest city in Ontario with a regional population of close to 1.5 million people. Queen Victoria chose Ottawa as Canada's capital in 1857, as it was a defensible location situated on the border between Quebec and Ontario. Canada's total land area includes thousands of adjacent islands, notably Newfoundland in the east, and those of the Arctic archipelago in the north. Canada is bounded by the Arctic Ocean to the north, the Atlantic Ocean to the east, 12 states of the United States to the south, and the Pacific Ocean and the Alaska to the west. Canada contains within its borders a vast variety of geographic features. In general, the country's landform structure can be considered as a vast basin more than 3,220 miles in diameter. The western rim of the basin is higher and more massive than its eastern counterpart, and pieces of the rim, notably in the far northwest and in the south, are missing. The main lines of Canadian landforms continue well into the United States, intimately linking the geography of both countries. To create such a large country, Canadians had to forge transportation and communication links in an east-west direction. The Canadian North still remains one of the least settled and least economically exploited parts of the world. Canada can be divided into 6 physiographic regions: the Canadian Shield, the Interior Plains, the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Lowlands, the Appalachian region, the Western Cordillera, and the Arctic Archipelago. By far the largest of Canada's physiographic regions, the Canadian Shield occupies about half of the total area of the country and is centered on Hudson Bay. The Shield consists of some of the world's oldest rocks, which were folded by mountain building movements and cut down by erosion until the area was reduced almost to a plain. It was warped and folded in places, so parts of it now stand much higher than others, especially around its outer edges. In the north, the rim is about 7,000 feet above sea level, and fjords with walls from 2,000 to 3,000 feet high extend many miles into the mountain masses. The rim is almost imperceptible in southern Ontario, but in northern Ontario it rises again to almost 1,500 feet above the northern shore of Lake Superior. Most of the Shield lies at elevations below 2,000 feet. Its lack of hills of any size produces a generally monotonous landscape, but geologically recent glaciations have had a striking effect on the surface. Surrounding the Canadian Shield are a number of extensive lowlands underlain by sedimentary rocks. The Arctic lowlands to the north, the Great Lakes to the south and southeast, and the interior or western plains to the west. The vast interior plains extend from the Arctic Ocean in the north, to the United States border in the south, and from the edge of the Canadian Shield in the east to the Rocky Mountain foothills in the west. Along the interior shield are a number of large lakes, which each has a greater surface area than Lake Ontario. In the southeast is the Manitoba lowland, where elevations are generally below 1,000 feet. It is underlaid by lacustrine sediments of the glacial Lake Agassiz and is the flattest land in the interior plains. To the west of the Manitoba lowland, the land rises in 2 steps: the Saskatchewan plain, which ranges from 1,500 to 2,100 feet, and the Alberta plain, which is more than 2,500 feet. These plains are rolling landscapes of glacial deposits laid over almost horizontal bedrock. In some areas, the undulating plains are interspersed with ranges of low hills studded with kettle lakes and flat-bottomed, now occupied by rivers such as the Assiniboine and the Saskatchewan system. These lands also contain large potash deposits, especially in Alberta, enormous reserves of coal, petroleum, and natural gas. The Great Lakes St. Lawrence region comprises the peninsula of southern Ontario, bounded by the Canadian Shield, Erie, and Ontario. The region, fairly small in area, is nevertheless important for its high agricultural productivity, intensive industrialization, and high degree of urbanization. The Appalachian region extends from the eastern townships of Quebec northeastward to the Gaspé Peninsula to the island of Newfoundland. The region consists of ancient folded rock formations that have been eroded into low rounded mountains, dissected by valleys and interrupted by lowland areas developed on weaker rock formations. The Cordillera region comprises a series of mountain belts some 500 miles wide along Canada's Pacific coast. In many places valley glaciers remain active, and snow-capped peaks are frequently hidden in the clouds. Viewed from above, the entire landscape seems to be an irregular sea of mountain ranges, trending in a north-south direction. The Rocky Mountains make up the eastern portion of the Cordillera from the Yukon border south to the 49th parallel, where they continue into the United States. The Rockies include more than 30 peaks exceeding 10,000 feet, including Mount Robson, which rises to 12,972 feet. Five of Canada's national parks are located within the Rockies, including Banff, which was established in 1885. Three major passes cut through the Rockies: the Yellowhead Pass, which is used by the Canadian National Railways, and the Kicking Horse Pass and Crow's Nest Pass, which are used by the Canadian Pacific Railway. The Arctic archipelago is composed of thousands of islands north of the Canadian mainland. The southeastern islands are an extension of the Canadian Shield. The balance consists of two distinctive landform regions, the Arctic lowlands to the south, and the mountains of the Inuitian region to the north. With less than 1% of the world's population, Canada has some 1/7 of the world's supply of accessible fresh water. Much of this water is stored in lakes and wetlands that cover about 1/5 of Canada's total area. The Great Lakes, the world's largest surface of fresh water, are shared with the United States and form part of the international border. About 3/4 of Canada's land area is drained by rivers flowing into the Arctic Ocean and Hudson and James Bays. The Arctic drainage basin is dominated by the Mackenzie River, Canada's longest river, which flows 2,635 miles from its source to its mouth. The utility of Canadian rivers is limited by two factors. Many flow through the northern part of the country, which is sparsely populated, and most of them are frozen over in winter. In the densely settled regions, pollution has further reduced the usefulness of the water. Almost all Canadian rivers are characterized by rapids and falls, many of which have been developed for hydroelectricity. Because of its great latitudinal extent, Canada has a wide variety of climates. Ocean currents play an important role, with both the warm waters of the Gulf Stream in the Atlantic, and the Alaska Current in the Pacific affecting climate. Westerly winds, blowing from the sea to the land, are the prevailing air currents in the Pacific and bring coastal British Columbia heavy precipitation and moderate winter and summer temperatures. The northern two-thirds of the country has a climate similar to that of northern Scandinavia, with very cold winters and cool summers. The central southern area of the interior plains has a typical continental climate, very cold winters, hot summers, and relatively sparse precipitation. Southern Ontario and Quebec have a climate with hot summers and snowy winters, similar to some parts of the American Midwest. Except for the West Coast, all of Canada has a winter season with average temperatures below freezing and with continuous snow cover. Canada's snowfall does not follow the same pattern as rainfall. In the north and the interior plains, snowfall is light because cold air is very dry. The snow is hard and dry, falls in small amounts, and is packed down by the constant wind. The east and west coasts are areas of lighter snowfall because the ocean usually makes the air too warm for large quantities of snow to fall. The depth of snow increases inland from each coast, reaching maximums of about 240 inches in the Rocky Mountains. Freezing precipitation may occur during the colder months in any part of the country, occasionally disrupting transportation and communication. Humid air masses from the Pacific cause enormous quantities of rain to fall on the west coast and mountain areas. Several sites along the British Columbia coast receive annual quantities in excess of 2,500 millimeters, but British Columbia receives much less precipitation in summer than in winter. Ontario and Quebec have more rainfall than the interior plains, because the air masses pick up water vapor from the Great Lakes, Hudson Bay, the Atlantic Ocean, and the Gulf of Mexico. Because winters are not as cold as in the interior plains, the air is less dry, and enough snow falls to make winter and summer precipitation about equivalent. Both landforms and climate affect the distribution of plants, animals, and soils. Ecologists recognize broad regions called ecosystems that are characterized by fairly stable complexes of climate, soils, and plant and animal life. The boundaries of these regions are not usually sharp lines on the landscape, but are broad transition areas. Tundra is the dominant land type of the Arctic and subarctic regions. With long cold winters, short cool summers, and low precipitation, the soils are thin or absent, and the vegetation is sparse. Because of the small number of plant and animal species, and the fragility of the food chains, damage to any element of the habitat may have an immediate chain reaction through the system. Considering the climatic conditions, tundra vegetation is quite varied. The long daylight periods of spring and summer contribute to sudden, rapid growth. The distinctive animals of the tundra are seals and polar bears, the latter feeding on seals and musk oxen, reindeer, Arctic hares, and lemmings, which feed on the tundra vegetation and are prey for wolves and white Arctic foxes. Numerous birds that normally live in mild climates often fly to the tundra for nesting. Two large birds that do this are the snow goose and the Canada goose. Canada has several large and distinct forest zones, which blend into a number of transitional zones. The northern coniferous forest is the world's second largest area of uninterrupted forest. The severe winter and short growing seasons limit the number of tree species. Among them, white and black spruce and white birch are common. Balsam and tamarack also have wide distribution. The boreal forest is an important source of pulpwood, and also produces considerable lumber, but much of the northern area is too inaccessible for commercial lumbering. A vast transitional zone, the Taiga Shield, comprising some 500,000 square miles of mixed boreal and tundra growth, connects the northern forest and the tundra region. Generally, the trees in this subarctic zone, with its cold, dry climate, are small and of little commercial consequence. Along the southern edge of the boreal forest lies two other transitional zones. In the interior plains, the forest merges with the grasslands to create an arc of aspen parkland, characterized by prairie vegetation dotted with groves of quaking aspen and other poplar species in low moist areas and along valley bottoms. Remnants of the only predominantly deciduous forest in Canada grow in the most southern portion of the southwestern Ontario peninsula. This is an extension of the Carolinian forest zone of the United States. In addition to the species it shares with the mixed forest, it contains trees usually found much farther south, such as the tulip tree, sycamore, black and white oak, and several types of hickory. The forest of the Pacific coast is Canada's densest tall timber forest. Abundant moisture and a long growing season are conducive to the growth of evergreens with very hard wood, excellent for construction lumber. Dense stands of immense trees, their trunks rising to considerable heights and their crowns almost touching each other, give a grandeur to the forest. Canada's forest soils are acidic, because of the various degrees to which minerals are leached out of the topsoil, which makes them infertile for agriculture. The degree of acidity and leaching is greater in the coniferous, and less in the mixed and deciduous forests. Wildlife regions correspond closely to the different forest zones. The subarctic supports large numbers of woodland reindeer. The boreal forest includes nearly all species of mammals and birds recognized as distinctively Canadian. Among these are moose, beavers, Canada lynx, black bears, wolves, snowshoe hares, and a variety of birds, including Canada jays, blue jays, gray jays, ravens, and crows. In summer, the coniferous forest fills with scores of varieties of warblers and other small birds that go north to nest. There are also numerous smaller mammals, including gray and red squirrels, minks, raccoons, muskrats, skunks, jackrabbits, cottontail rabbits, groundhogs, and a variety of mice and moles. In southern Ontario, the wild turkey, which had disappeared because of hunting and the reduction of its habitat, was reintroduced in the 1980s with some success. Coyotes are now seen as far south as the parkland ravines of Toronto. Rocky Mountain sheep, mountain goats, elk, mule deer, and black bears are common in the southern mountains. The southern portion of the interior plains is too dry for forests, and gives rise to grasslands or natural prairies. The native vegetation of the most southerly area consists of shortgrass with sagebrush and cactus. Farther north, where there is slightly more precipitation, there is a band of tallgrass prairie. With its high organic matter and mineral content, the grassland soils are among Canada's most fertile. The best soils for crops are the dark brown to black soils of the tallgrass and parkland zone. Canada began earning its reputation as a leading producer and exporter of wheat hundreds of years ago. The first crop was planted in the 1600s with seed imported from Europe. Before long, the wheat harvest was more than enough needed to feed Canada's population, and the surplus seed flowed back to Europe. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please don't forget to give a like, share, and subscribe.